Everyone, thank you so much for coming. So this is the very first time we've had a Indie Prize judge panel. I guess most of the indie developers are at their booth still or celebrating with their awards. But we thought it would be a great chance to get together and just sort of learn a little bit more about the indie judge process, what that's all about, and also put some faces to the judges' names, and then ideally offer some advice too as well. And also we want to hear from the developers, hear from you guys, in terms of what you need to know to have a better run the next showcase in Tel Aviv. So my name is Lefebvre. I work with a company called Pretio Interactive. We do advertising right in Victoria, Canada. I also am one of the judges for Indie Prize and organizer for the IGDA in Victoria. So definitely dedicated to helping game developers in pretty much any way I can. And here are our 8 panelists, all judge members of the Indie Prize Showcase. So I'll just maybe allow you to move down the line and introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what you do when you're not judging games.
Absolutely. My name is Rob Carroll. I'm the head of publishing for Immersive. We are a virtual reality discovery network. What I do primarily with developers is work with them on optimization of their games, look at some of the core game loops, some of the things that they're doing in their games, and teaching them how to avoid mistakes and perhaps fix things that are hurting the gameplay. So I'm very hands-on with developers and helping them to optimize.
Thank you. All right, my name is Whitfield. I've ran my own review website for a little over about 7 years now, but I've recently transitioned to Casual Connect, and this has probably been my 9th or 10th time judging for Indie Prize. So I've been involved for a while. I've seen a lot of games, and I've traveled to the Europe conference and seen a lot of games there. So seen a lot of games, talked to a lot of developers, and been involved with the indie community from a judge and review perspective for a little while. So that's all I have to say.
I like that approach. I'm going to borrow that. I'm going to tilt my profile based on how it touches the indie game community. So I've also been in games for a while. I ran Game Developer Magazine, which had a focus on indie developers. Ran the Game Developers Conference, which had the Independent Game Festival, which remains to be one of the largest showcases for indie games. I guess I shouldn't wax too philosophic about that at Casual Connect, but I also did business development at EA, where we published several indie games through EA's marketing and production capabilities, like Clay Entertainment's Shank. And I ran my own indie game studio called Wormhole Games. I work at Google Play now. I'm our game strategic lead, where I manage our outreach and support strategy for key segments on the store, ranging from AAA games, but also indies and influencers and startups as well. We recently announced our Google Play Indie Games Festival here in San Francisco, September 24th, and I also curate the Daydream portfolio for games. So our new VR smartphone high-performance platform, I manage the selection and curation for the initial outreach for those titles. And so here, I've been focused on the VR titles in Indie Prize.
Great.
Hi, my name is Henry O. I've been an Indie Prize judge for over 2 years now. When I started, I was working for a large Asian developer publisher where I was evaluating games for publishing. Now I work at a company called Tenjin. We provide data infrastructure for app developers. And what I focus on is like mechanics as well as analytics around game adoption and growth. So user acquisition, monetization, best practices around those areas. In the past, I used to work in film and music, and I wrote for CNN for a little bit. And really happy to work with indie devs.
And I've been judging for about 7 years now,
wow.
And did the past 5 judging sessions for Casual Connect. I love working with the indie developers. I come from a company called Immersion that coined the technology of force feedback and haptics that we use in many of the gaming devices today. And I've been working in the gaming space for over 17 years now. And seeing all the devotion that all the creativity, all the innovation that the developer community has, I love being connected to that. And so whenever I can be a part of something like this, I just jump right in.
Awesome.
I'm Steven Ip. I'm also an independent game developer had a company called Boxcat Games. We released a game on iOS and did pretty good. And then I released the soundtrack on Creative Commons, and I've gotten about 1.4 million downloads on that and helped a lot of people have a free soundtrack and things like that in their game. Right now I'm at a company called ADVR. We started it about a couple months ago like that. And what we're doing is creating native ad units for virtual reality. So we're kind of a technology company, and we're made of game designers and people that love games, so hopefully we'll be able to make ads non-intrusive to the user experience.
Hi, I'm Shelley. I'm the managing partner at IPC Ventures. So we are a mobile-first focused investment or VC fund. And so we have a specialization sort of investing in the mobile gaming space. So obviously our focus is always about the mobile games. So I've been judging for about 2 years. So we love to work with like indie developers because we invest in the early stage companies, mostly not more than 15 people. We actually been trying to build up the community for certain part of the world, and we created Tokyo Indie Fest last year. It was good, but you know, it's not something we do all the time. So we try to be like contributing to the community by working with Casual Connect and some other organization to help as well educating the industry.
Awesome. So yeah, these are 8 of 28 judges total. A lot of industry experience here, and you know, obviously, thank you guys so much for all the time that you put in. And I think, I mean, before we get into questions, but by all means, jump in with questions anytime you have them. You know, one thing I'm kind of curious about is, you know, there's a ton of submissions, and we've seen a lot of growth year over year. I think there's 70% year-over-year growth in the San Francisco showcase alone. So, how do you do it? How do you? I mean, with over 300 games in about a 6-day window to approve for the showcase, even before digging deeper and looking at the nominees. So I mean, yeah, who wants to take the lead on it and telling us how it's even possible to get through so many games? You have anything on that, Bob?
Yeah, sure. First of all, you don't do anything else. So you don't multitask. You sit down and you really start going through that list. And the first thing that I'm looking at really is the video that they put out. And even some of the developers, they didn't have downloadable versions of the game that you could get. Yeah. So you really had to rely on that video content, or the keys wouldn't work sometimes. So first thing, quick pass, as quick as you can, going through 300 submissions, all the videos that you can, and just taking a quick pass on what is this game about? What does it remind me of? What is different or innovative about it? And just taking some quick notes about it. And once you've gone through that way, digging in deeper. But I don't know how other people can start the process.
Yeah, I would just like to second that. Like, I think maybe indie devs who submit don't realize how important the trailer really is.
Absolutely.
And I think after several years of doing this, you can notice like certain best practices or things that kind of impress you about certain video trailers and things that you probably want to avoid. And happy to share that later if people are interested.
Well, let's hear it now. What should developers be doing in their videos?
So I think being able to highlight certain things up front as to like what the game is about or things that you want to like emphasize. So if you're doing a submission in the multiplayer category, or the family category, put that in part of the titles in the video trailer. Like an exciting family game that's multiplayer. Like let the judges know like what the game is about right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Let them know like what's unique or special about the game. And then I saw in one or a few submissions, like people actually include a little bit about themselves and why they've made the game or what they're passionate about. And that makes an impression on me because it takes it away from this some random like short video to like this is a person who spent years working on this. And I think things like that make it more personal are also really effective in terms of the trailer.
I would add for VR, it's helpful if the video has an inset showing the player what their experience is playing the game. Input is such an important part of it, and seeing how they're interacting with the virtual world is very helpful to see how to play it.
And I mean, the same could be said for a multiplayer game. Seeing a group of people playing that game, having fun. I mean, that's going to immediately make it stand out as a multiplayer contender.
I think the other thing to remember is that you're not making an ad trailer. You're not trying to, this isn't UA for your game. You're trying to show us what are the cool loops, what are the cool parts of the game. So a 30-second sizzle reel isn't necessarily going to really teach us what it is about your game. A couple of developers had 10 or 14-minute gameplay videos, and that was really helpful. We just were able to watch how the game works and how the play actually evolved and what are the core loops of the game. And that is, I think, super helpful for us in that initial pass. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we can't play an hour or 2 hours of each of the games, so we're able to get in there and kind of look at the games on that first initial pass, but having a video showing what is the cool part, what is that core loop that we should be looking at is very helpful.
I've seen a lot of developers as well, like unlock content. So, like give you a passcode or whatever the case may be, so that it unlocks all the levels right away, rather than having to progress through it naturally.
Yeah, I don't have to monetize during my my game reviews.
How about you guys? Any advice on the video front?
Sure. So, for the videos, I think a lot of times people will just do like a cut of just the gameplay, like literally like I'm gonna have to click on the tutorial box and things like that. That can be skipped a bit. You just cut directly to the action that you want us to see. I mean, this has been voiced over and over again by everybody, but just try to make it efficient. I love the 15-minute trailer video, but sometimes I don't really want to figure you messing with your login box because it wasn't working properly. Like I just want to go straight to it. I want to see exactly like what's the cool part about the game, and why should I vote for this thing or whatnot.
I got a comment on that though. There were a couple of videos that I really liked where they dug down into the menu system and how you would build out items before you got into the gameplay. Mm-hmm. And that was really helpful. That's stuff that would get glossed over in a trailer. And also there were many videos that didn't have actual gameplay audio. Like either they didn't have audio or they had substituted audio. Once I played the game, it was different than what was in the video clip. And when I'm trying to pick best audio, it's kind of hard to do that if they're...
Yeah, absolutely.
I might miss it.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely key for that video to be as representative as possible. Absolutely. And so, after that first pass, you guys have watched all the videos. You guys have been doing this a long time, so you probably have developed ways to become more efficient at it. I mean, how much time are you allocating to an individual game? And obviously that varies wildly. I mean, a more casual game, you can get a good feel for it in maybe an hour or so, but there's more immersive PC-style games that probably take a little bit longer. How much time can you spend, I guess, but how much time do you spend digging into these games?
I mostly did the VR and the mobile games, and I was probably 15 to 20 minutes per game.
Yeah.
After that initial cut.
Great. That's pretty much the same across the board. So what are you guys seeing in terms of the trends and submissions, in terms of like the types of games that are being made? I mean, again, there's going to be a lot of variance, but yeah, Henry.
Over the last 18 months, seen a big rise in Steam submissions.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
I think that's also driven by the growth of Unity as a platform, or other multi-platform development engines, where indie devs have heard enough horror stories about people who spend $100,000 building a free-to-play mobile game and they make no money. And they hear about their colleagues who have done some Steam games where they make at least $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 or more, and it seems like a lot safer bet. And so what you're seeing more and more is that indies look at Steam initially and then look at mobile as something to do after they get some traction maybe on Steam. So I think that's a big shift that I've noticed.
Well, and that's interesting. I mean, yeah, there's definitely been a lot of PC submissions, and I mean, you can see that on the floor. I'd say potentially upwards of 2/3 of the showcase attendees are PC games, and so I mean, it kind of brings to light a few interesting issues. One, this is a casual gaming conference, and the sponsors are here for content creators, and they likely want to be working free-to-play mobile games. So there's a bit of a dissonance there. But also, I mean, how do you stack up a PC game against a mobile game? They're entirely different experiences. So, I know for myself, I grew up a PC gamer and entered into the mobile gaming space largely through work, and so I'm always going to be leaning a little bit more towards PC. I just have that natural bias. So, I mean, Jamil especially, like, what do you do with it? I mean, in your experience in terms of how to balance out these two vastly different platforms and experiences?
Well, it's a great question. One of the things that we try to do at Google Play is to provide a platform that enables every type of business model. So I was just talking to David Edery about this over lunch. in that we have, who's the CEO of Spryfox. So there's an indie studio that is working on primarily free-to-play indie games, and there isn't as much of a platform for that. Earlier in my career, I was with GDC's IGF, and a lot of what is currently built around indie games, or the support structure for indie games, is a lot about the classic PC console premium model. So it seems to me that it's incumbent upon platforms that have strong free-to-play models thriving on them to better support indies on those platforms. So to that end, we've introduced Indie Corner on the store as a dedicated destination to find indie games, and that's part of the reason why we've developed and are working on our own indie game festival, because indie developers thrive on being able to present their games in a public setting. Typically, indies don't have a large user acquisition budget. It's not part of their culture. Their culture is to make art. It's just to make a great game. So, it seems that large platforms have the standing to actually amplify that art. So that's how we see our mission.
Okay, great. Shelley?
I think there's probably two camps, right, in the indie scene. It's really one are really taking it as seriously as a business, and others are more like lifestyle, could be hobby for the side project. But for those who are serious about making it a business, I think they don't have to think about being an indies have to do it all by themselves and all. If they have a really good concept, they should build it out and then bring it to the market, put it in events like this, and get a lot of exposure, and then they can get a partnership to help them bring it to the market or get funding from us or some others, right? So there's not, of course, if you do it all by yourself with three people on one team, then it's not going to happen, right? But if you want to start the prototype and then have a really good vision, concept, and a long-term business view, then I think that will sustain you to build a long-term mobile games business. And of course, we support the free-to-play approach.
Cool, great. So let's, yeah.
Real quick on that point, I've judged many indie games, and there are so many that I like that were just what you're talking about. They're artists and what they're doing, but they really don't get the business side at all. They don't even have in-app purchase in there, and they don't have any ads going on. They're not thinking about that at all. But I'm like, God, this is a great game, and it's only got 1,000 or 5,000 downloads. And they're not even thinking about reaching out to find someone to partner with in any way. And so there are a lot of industry veterans here that I know some of you, you're looking for those. You're looking for those diamonds in the rough that you can pull in and say, you know what, let me help you with this. And I think that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to find these guys, and that's why we're judging them, to say, you're a real diamond in the rough, and I get it. I get what you're doing, and you've done some really great art here. If you want to take the next step, maybe I'm not the right guy to help, but I'm going to point them. I'm going to help them along that road, because I believe in games that feel great. I don't like crappy games, And and for example, you've got a game you really love, and you go camping, and you can't connect to a server anywhere, so you can't play the game. That kills me. And I understand why big gaming companies do that, but at the same time, I want to impress on developers to at least give the person who's passionate about playing your game an option to play it wherever, right?
Even camping.
So it's little things like that I want to help out the developer on. I think we all feel that way.
Let's dig into the actual award categories a little bit. So, best audio was Falso Echo, I believe. Congratulations, by the way. Awesome game. So, when we're looking at audio, what do we look at? What do we look for? I mean, there's music, there's sound effects, audio, possibly voice acting. I mean, what stands out for you, and what do you dig into? You have something there, Stephen?
For me as a musician as well, I'm going to be extra critical because, that's just how I am. But with best audio, I think for my criteria was, number one, the most important thing is, does the audio support the game? Is that part of the environment? Does the sound effects make sense? Have I heard this in some sound pack somewhere? You know, and if I did, it's okay, but does it match exactly how it feels? And do I forget that I'm even judging the audio anymore? Am I just locked into the game, right? That if I forget that I'm doing it anymore, you got me. You know, I'm just like, okay, that's a 5.
Yeah, I actually remember, I believe it was during Amsterdam, I was, firing up a bunch of games. I had my Android phone, my iPhone, my computer, a ton of different machines going. And I was in the process of downloading this game while I was in like the load screen for a game. And like it was a short loop audio, but I completely blanked out. I completely forgot that I was listening to something that was on repeat. And I was just like, that alone, I was just like, oh, okay, well, I didn't get sick of hearing the same thing over and over again. So that, that definitely makes it a top contender. What do you guys see in audio, Aaron? I mean, in terms of what you look for?
I would definitely say the audio has to fit the game and the game style and the game play. And I would definitely say the audio should complement the game, that the audio needs to fit the game, but it should also kind of be background noise. It shouldn't stand out too much, but it should be there if, a subtle soundtrack, or maybe you've got a fast upbeat game. The audio should match if it's an upbeat game, but it shouldn't distract the user too much from the game itself.
Great.
So that would be my take.
So to be really specific, if you have designed your game where there are certain critical moments that are kind of like, on Tetris when someone clears a row or whatever, you want to design a sound that really matches like the payoff of that moment. Like if you look at like Candy Crush or some of these other games, when someone does that critical action, it's a very gratifying sound. And it's not a sound that's going to be annoying to hear over and over again. It's somehow visceral. So one of the things I look for is how well the game design matches the sound design. So if you have these like critical moments in the game or certain achievement points, that you've mapped them to sound design that actually supports that and actually drives player behavior. So that's something specific I look for.
I think one thing that I particularly enjoyed out of this round of the showcases was rotocolor runners, where the audio, they're integrating songs from SoundCloud and making that part of the gameplay. There's that extra layer of innovation as well. I thought that was pretty interesting. Best art. Let's talk about art. What do we look for? I thought actually that the winner of the best art game made a really interesting, hilarious comment. So Asura, for those who missed it, Asura won best art. And the winner got up on stage and said that we must have been drunk because there was a bunch of better looking games, including, and I have to agree with them. Honestly, there was. So, I mean, what's your guys' take on this?
I think it depends on matching the theme of the game itself. But I've seen a lot of games that obviously fantasy, fighting game, they're all very dark.
Yeah.
And so when I come across something brighter, then I think it attracts my attention better. And then, I think, it's really how polished of the artwork it is. And, but I come across some like 2D hand drawing. I think a lot of time it's very subjective. I think, to me, I sort of more tune to more colorful and not 2D type of graphics.
I thought another interesting one was Sketch Tales, where you actually create art and put it in the game. And again, having that degree of innovation on top of the base level sort of category, very much, and rotocolor runners as well. I mean, that game is gorgeous to look at. Super hard to play, very confusing, but absolutely stunning. It's just beautiful.
So I would agree, something different, if something catches my eye, and I do a little bit of art myself, but I tend to like bright colors in my own things that I do, but the things that set a tone, that set a mood, that really, like you said, match the theme of the game, like Limbo did so well when they did their implementation. And we had games like that in the submissions here that I enjoyed too, but I felt like, okay, I've kind of seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
The wow factor was a little bit gone on the ones that are just kind of monocolor, monochrome. But if they're cutouts, like cutout stuff, the first time I saw a cutout piece, I was like, whoa, that's really interesting. That gets me. So that wow factor then also tied to the themes. And it really doesn't matter to me whether it's really bright or really dark, just if it matches what's going on. And I get that wow factor the first time I see it. And sometimes it has to do with the animation, with the flow of the art in it. Like I may look at it the first time just static as an image, and I go, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then I start seeing how they're using that art. It's like, wow, okay, now you got me.
Great.
Depending where the developer's based, or if they're from Europe versus from Asia or US, maybe a little bit more diverse here. But I found that games from Asia are a bit colorful, but then games from from Europe is a bit darker. But it's just maybe my pattern recognition.
Well, no, I mean, there's definitely geographical trends, absolutely.
I would also say that platform matters.
Yep.
I played Biombes by Pablo and team, and they had, yes, absolutely. And, you know, for VR, like Steve was saying, is realism important? Not necessarily. So the game has a very cartoon cel-shaded style to it. And that makes it very forgiving to play. And it helps with dealing with motion sickness. It helps with dealing with a lower fidelity platform and allows people to really get into the play of it without getting distracted and can actually enjoy it. Also helps with the broader appeal as well, because I think when you have a game that has that focuses on ultra-realism, you naturally scope down the audience. Whereas if you have a game that has a more cartoon-like look to it, you open the audience.
Yep. Let's talk about best game design. I mean, I find that to be one of the most interesting categories because that's where you really start to dig into the meat and the mechanics of how a game works. What were some of the better titles that you saw in the design?
I think, looking at design, it's actually really challenging when you're looking at such a broad range of different types of games. You have VR, mobile, PC. I found what I was looking for when I was judging the games is how they implemented the design for what they were going for. Like Free Range, your game was incredibly deep, and I imagine took a long time to kind of get all that design and balance in there together. You look at something like Critter Splitters?
Splitter Critters.
A very simple game, but the way they implemented the design for what they were going for fit the game. It was well done and well thought out. So, for myself, looking at how I'm judging these games, I'm really looking for what is the goal, what is the mechanics that they're going for within the type of game that they're making, and then how well did they execute on that.
Steve?
For me, really, I'm looking for something new. I'm looking for something that really, I can't put my finger on it, but I can't exactly say that this was a game that I've played before. It's kind of similar to other games, and one of the ones that really impressed me, I said I wasn't going to say specifics, but I'll give a shout out to this one, The Foos.
Yeah.
That one was just, you could just see how well polished that it was on the design side. It was one of the few games where, I picked it up and I knew exactly what to do. Everything's very very intuitive. Design's very broad, right? Are you talking about UX? Are you talking about game design? Are you talking about decision tree loops? It could be anything that what's designed, right? But that game really kind of just got me I don't know, it got me excited, and it's just oh man, if I was a kid and I wanted to learn how to do procedural motion and how to get this guy to jump over a box, and I'm screwing up, and I've built games before, and I'm just why can't I figure this out? And I realized it's just because I'm an idiot. It's not because of the game,
Well, I mean, that's an excellent point, and particularly I think in the judging process, I mean, that onboarding experience is important not only for us but users as a whole. I mean, you also want to balance, showing somebody how to play but not giving everything away. So, I mean, yeah, in terms of tutorials and onboarding, it's absolutely critical that users are.
Another thing with game design that I really look at is menus, settings, and how do I navigate the user interface. Because we only have so much time to judge the games. We can't spend 8 hours on a game. So big thing I look at is the menus, navigation. How do I get to the settings? Can I change the texture detail? Can I change other settings? And how many menus or levels down do I need to go to access that? Another thing I also look at is maybe your game has a tutorial, right? Well, is there an option to go back and replay the tutorial or click on a help button that brings up a little pop-up explaining what each button does on the UI? So kind of apart from what they said, big thing I look at is menus and how many levels down do I need to go to access certain things.
Yeah, one thing I'm seeing a lot too, and we'll get to you right after, but we have a question. Good. I think that's something that we're evolving towards a little bit. I mean, especially with the new VR category. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I would say that's a good idea because I know some of us don't have Android, some of us may not have gaming type PCs or even consoles. So I would definitely say that that's a good idea to look in towards either if you have all the platforms then go ahead and judge all the games, but if there's if you only have VR and maybe a desktop that can game, maybe you should only judge those two categories.
Yeah.
That was
No,
a good
absolutely.
idea.
Absolutely. I know for myself, I opted out of VR because I don't have the hardware. And it'd be a waste of that developer's time to have me look at it. Although I still played the Fishing Planet one because that game is, speaking of game design, like that game is incredibly well designed. I mean, just the detail, although I live about 20 meters away from a place where I can go fishing, so the whole escapism was pointless for me. One other thing I started noticing in game design, and I'm seeing this a lot more, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, especially in the free-to-play mobile, I'm seeing a lot of the better submissions already have their monetization sorted out. Like they're already working, and I think that's really, really smart, and I think that's really, really good advice for developers who are making a free-to-play game, or maybe thinking of moving a game into free-to-play. Is obviously you want those advertisements to be as friendly towards UX as possible, and you want to be thinking about that well in advance. So quick piece of advice, game design wise, don't make a game and then jam ads in it. Make sure that you consider how you're going to be monetizing through ads. Did you have something you wanted to add, Stephen?
Yeah, to add on the free-to-play stuff, so if you're kind of like a first-time game developer, this probably doesn't apply to anybody here, but this is just in general, and you're like, well, free-to-play makes the most money, so I'm going to just make a free-to-play game. It's incredibly difficult. It's like ridiculously difficult, and if you think that you're a three-man team going to make a free-to-play game with like server connection, just stop. You're not. It's impossible. It's almost impossible. And there's a lot of like now back-end services and things like that help out, but you still need to figure out like, well, how are you tracking your D1, D7 retention? Like how are you doing all these like retention and monetization and like analysis and all this kind of stuff? You have no idea what I'm talking about. It's going to be quite a challenge, like to even implement that in. And I say, build the best game that you possibly can, and then figure out like, does monetization on certain game mechanics even make sense? Usually when you design free-to-play, you design it from the beginning. You don't kind of jam it in like what you were saying. You don't just jam ads in places. Like it's really just designed from the beginning that this is going to be a free-to-play game. So just keep that in mind if anybody's like suddenly wanting to make a free-to-play game because your premium game only sold 10,000 copies or something.
Of course.
Well, I think that there is a lot of there are a lot of tools out there for developers. You look at Unity, you look at Unreal these days. If you have a good idea, you can go out and get a library. You can get a bunch of the art and the audio to kind of fill in areas that you might not be skilled in. You can plug in the analytics packages, the ad packages, kind of all of these ancillary parts of game development, which are critically important, are available to you to just kind of plug and play, which is kind of amazing when you think about where a lot of us have been over the years as we have evolved. And if we wanted to make a game, it was like the first 4 months of development was, okay, let's go build the engine, and then let's go build the the server connection, and it was over and over. Every time you went to make a new game, you started from the beginning, and the first thing you did was build the technology that you would build your game in. And I think now for developers, you can just go and say, okay, Unity, okay, Unreal, I will use your engine, and I want to plug this in, and ooh, I like that art over here. And it opens up the opportunity for indie developers to come in and say, like, I have this really cool idea. I'm just going to make this. And okay, I do need to make money on it. Okay, let's put the ad in here. And oh, I need to know what my my retention is. And I need to know what my onboard funnel is. And okay, I'll plug this in here. And I think that opportunity is so amazing for developers. And I think a lot of folks need to definitely take advantage of that as they're going out and building these games.
Great. Shelley, yes.
So I guess I'm going to sound more like a boring parents to kids, right? Like building games, if it's a business, it's kind of like trying to build a career or build a resume, right? You want to get through the process. So in order to learn, like if you don't know how to build free-to-play, well, I think maybe I actually come across a student group. They do a side project outside school and build pretty casual games, and then thought they have brilliant ideas. And actually it's fine, but I think it's whether you have that experience, so you should go get the job and really get some experience first if you really wanted to build free-to-play games and you really want to make it as a sort of your own long-term career or not. but by all means, you don't want to force yourself, like, so going back and forth, like start with premium games and then add something here and there. So it's pretty much like the overall sort of engineering process, design process. You want to think about what is your end goal, what is your end path, and then you go from there. So it's really that sort of thought process.
I think we have about 10 minutes left, so I want to talk about narrative really quickly. Because to me, I mean, I grew up playing point-and-click adventure games, and narrative is super, super important. And there's some amazing games submitted in narrative. And I find that most often, the best are either really funny or super depressing. Tends to be the case. And that, I mean, the particularly depressing. There's like a wave of super depressing games. So I mean, what's your guys' take on this? I mean, it's so interesting that, I mean, as you say, we grew up in gaming, we grew up Nintendo, Super Nintendo. There is almost nothing depressing about 16-bit games. So what is it about games in general that's maturing to the point where, it's not just not just action, arcade, and fun, but it's actually becoming quite a platform, quite a vehicle to tell like really heart-wrenching stories. I mean, Revisions, for example, amazing narrative game, brutally honest. I've never seen such like an exposed nerve in a game before. So I mean, in terms of what you're seeing, what do you think? What do you think about that, Jamil?
Well, I think there's a lot of truth in what you're talking about, in that because the means of production are much more accessible, you have a broader range of content that can be expressed. We're talking about the indie film movement, talking about the tools that are available. Certainly, we're seeing a lot of that on Google Play. But I don't think the middle is necessarily neglected. I think there are a lot of just wonderfully lighthearted stories that may have a serious tone at some point. Like Never Alone, I think, is a good example of that, where it feels like the 8-bit, 16-bit platformers we grew up with, but it has meaning because the narrative is derived from local culture, is derived from stories that we don't typically hear. So there's an innovation to it as well. We recently featured that at the top of the store on Google Play, a premium game that has a strong story that is still lighthearted. So I think there's still a strong representation there. It's just that we have so many great examples of very very powerful messages like this War of Mine, games that Papers, Please, games that kind of get you to think about things that fluff entertainment just doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing to remember is that just because you have a strong story, a powerful message, it doesn't necessarily make it a good game. I think there was there's some stuff that I saw that was very deep and troubling and emotional, but it wasn't a game. And, I think there's a place for that in a lot of the like Tribeca Film Festival, a lot of the festivals that are out there that would be more focused towards that type of content. And I think what we're looking at here is more about good gameplay, and having good gameplay and a deep, impressive story and narrative is great, but just because you have the story doesn't make it a good game.
Absolutely. Question? That's a great question. What is a game?
Well, it's the mechanics, right? If it does get you, that's the first part of it, and if there's a narrative to go along with it, it's like different kinds of music. There's room for a full spectrum of music. So whether you've got an interactive narrative that's going on, or if it's just really like a comic book story that you're moving through, there's room for it all. And it is, what's your goal? Are you trying to monetize off of it? Do you have to put video clips in there for ads? Or do you have to sell episodic content for the narrative that's going on? Or do you even care? Are you a premium title where you're just selling it and you're going to be true to your art and it's good enough that people are just going to buy it? There's room for it all. I don't think there's a line,
I don't know. I might disagree, honestly. There was one game in particular that I believe was in the showcase, Will, a Wonderful World, Will, a Wonderful World, where there was no playing of anything. You just click a button and the next string of text loads, and that was it. Plug and Play kind of reminded me of that. I don't know if you guys remember that one from Amsterdam, but that was just sort of an exploration into like madness. You just randomly, it's like all black and white. I don't know if anybody's played Plug and Play, but you should definitely check it out. But it was one of the weirdest games I've ever played in my life, and I just laughed the whole time. I was just delighted the whole time. I think we're running out of time, so one last question. I have one last question for these guys, and then you guys can all chat after. why should game developers submit to Indie Prize? Why should the developers submit to Indie Prize?
As an indie developer myself, these prizes that you win are incredibly important for discoverability. So, again, you don't have $1 million to spend on UA, user acquisition. I sure didn't when I first started. And I really relied on these prizes to kind of show people that, hey, we're a step above like the other games that you see. I mean, I think earlier you were telling me there's like 1,000 apps submitted every week to the App Store or something like that, 300 games a day or something. I don't know, like there's just a ridiculous amount of games right now, and how do you stand above the noise? And one of them is to have all the laurels, that you won the Indie Game Prize and things like that, because what it translates to is, number one, other people said that your game was good. You can put that as advertisement into your own game. You can put that into your PR movement and et cetera. And guess who looks at PR and guess who looks at all that stuff, especially if, you're trying to get onto, like the Apple feature or something like that, the prize guy usually will get a feature. It's not really, I would love to see the correlation between how many laurels you have and how many times you got featured on a platform, And that's why you should submit. And it's a free submission, I believe. So, Indiecade in LA, that one's, I think it costs you like $100 to go submit on that one. So you should just submit at every single award show that you can afford the time for.
Absolutely.
And
Aaron, you have something you want to add?
I would say firsthand feedback, both from other developers around your booth, but also just casual gamers that come to the conference either for the lectures or people come here just for the games too. So I would say a big part of why you should submit to Indie Prize and be on a showcase is to get that feedback firsthand, right there in front of you in person, not through an email, not through a tweet, Facebook, anything like that, but see the reactions firsthand from the players playing the game or other developers giving you feedback on your game as well.
Also, sandwiches.
Yeah, you can't beat the food either.
I think they should really submit it for the spirit and for being part of the community and all that, but don't really take it personally if you don't win. Right? At the end of the day, a lot of those who win might not be sort of what we're looking for either, right? Not the population looking for either. So it doesn't really dictate any or indicator. It's not a really good indicator, but it's really good to be part of the community.
I'd say one more thing that's super important for all the indies out there is to get our business cards, Make connections while you're here. Get all the business cards you have for people in the industry because they're very supportive. They all want to help.
Great. Well, thank you so much to the panelists and our sponsors and all you guys. Thanks.